Hi, this is Chris from the Orange Coast College Art Department covering how to do a 9-up layout in 4K for thumbnails for entertainment artists and illustrators. So here's an example of the finished product that we'd like to get, and it's not too hard to set up at all. So I'm going to take you through how to do it from scratch. What you see is a 3x3 grid of 16 by 9 aspect ratio boxes laid out on a 4K dimension. And this way we can do some thumbnailing and have it look presentable. So let's start with a new 4K file. So I've got this in my recents and in my saved. You can also find it in the film and video section. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And I think I want to fill it with about a 75% dark. So I'm going to select that gray and just hit Option Delete to fill it with a 75% gray. The next thing I want to do is give myself a new layer, and I want those boxes to be black because it'll force me to think about every area within the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and do a new layer, and I'm going to fill that with black. So I'll make black my foreground color and then fill with foreground to make it black. Next thing I want to do is make that box smaller. The reason I'm doing it as a full layer is so I inherit that 16 by 9 aspect ratio. So I went to Free Transform. I'm holding down Option and Shift so that it scales proportionally and it scales around the center. So I think what I want to do is get somewhere around 1025, and that will repeat well in a 3x3 grid for a 9-up format. So let's see if I can get that. There we go. So there's 1025 by 577. When I get it there, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And the nice part about resizing it in a centered fashion is it'll leave it centered right in the middle of my canvas. And that's nice because I can work everything else off of it. Knowing that I'm going to want all my layers to have the transparency locked, I'm going to go ahead and just lock this one right now, because all I'm going to do is make some copies. So I'm going to go to the Move tool, and I'm going to hold down Option, and you see when I do that I get the double arrow, which means I'm going to make a copy. And I'm going to move it over, I don't know, about 236 works out pretty good. And that made a new layer, a copy of my original. Now I'm going to do it back the opposite direction. So let's go to that first layer, the original layer 2, hold down Option. And I can hold down Shift to make sure that I stay parallel, but I've got my smart guides on, so it's going to try to help me, and it's going to give me guidance when I match the other spacing. So 1, 2, 3 right across the middle. Now I'm going to go to my layer palette and select the bottom one, hold down Shift so I can select all 3 when I click on the top. So with all 3 selected, I'm going to go hold down the Option again, so I make a copy, so I can copy drag, and I'm going to go up about 113 pixels. So let's see, right in there. And now I've got 6. Last thing I need to do is, again, hold down Option again, make some more copies. So I'm going to copy drag down, and it's going to help me match my spacing. So it's pretty easy to get this layout. And now if I just want to start working on one of these layers, let's say the middle left one, I've got it locked in transparency, so it's going to stay that size. I may even want to, let's do this. I should go ahead and lock the position on the art bar as well, so they don't move around. So I've got transparency and position locked. I think that'll be good to avoid accidents. So back to the middle left column. I'm going to go ahead and let's say we're painting foreground, middle ground, and background. I'm going to go ahead and select, let's say a 50% gray for my foreground. Hit Option Delete to fill that guy. And that'll be my background layer. And I want to do a middle ground and a foreground, so I'm going to do 2 more layers. We'll call this M, short for middle. And let's take about a 15%. Make some mountains. Actually, I think I want to do this maybe a little closer to my original, just so it's a slight mountain shape, a little bit of contrast. I'm doing this with a trackpad, so it's a little rough. So actually, that's my background. So let me retitle this guy background. And you might notice I'm painting beyond the edge of the border, and that's okay. Now I'm going to make another layer, call that middle ground. And let's do some really light tree line. And maybe a person walking. Wow, this is rough with my trackpad. Better with a stylus. His pal over here. And let's up this guy and give it a little ground plane that they're walking on. And then lastly, let's do a foreground. So I'll give that a capital F. And I think I'll just do some darker, shadowy plants. So this will be in the foreground. Maybe I've got a little tree canopy. Oops, not that guy. Tree canopy and more plants. I'm going to go back into my middle ground layer, sample this, make sure I paint out the ground. And back to my foreground layer. And you probably notice, like, gosh, that looks awfully messy. He goes way over the edge of the border. That's because I know I'm going to use a clipping group. So I'm going to take my layer 2, copy 2, that initial background. I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm going to click the border between the layers. And that's going to use the layer 2, copy 2, to restrict the layers in the clipping group above it to the limits of the rectangle. So it makes it nice and neat. So there's a very rough foreground, middle ground, background thumbnail. But you can see how to put it all together in a 9-up situation that, done a little bit nicer, can be pretty presentable. I hope that helps you out, and I hope you keep on making great art.